Alright, it's time to go back to the normal schedule. Where to even begin this? Oh, I know! How about a tribute to the Disrespectoids? A thing that you should absolutely keep in mind for going to this mixtape is that you are not going to get a Magdalene 2 like many people are expecting. Instead, this new Twigs project shows a brighter, more uplifting and catchy side of her music. But it's far from being a sellout record, because the core of what makes her music so engaging is still very present here. There's still a lot of glitchy goodness available to everyone to enjoy in this project. Is it less artsy? Yes, it is. But by no means bad. It's 17 solid tracks, showing that Twigs doesn't have to be constantly doing futuristic / mind-bending works to keep the bars up. And it's something I admire about this project. Wanna know what else I admire? The positive highlights, of course. Look at them all glimmery. Oh, there's that too. Anyway, 84%. The first major release of 2021 was also the very first album I've heard this year. Of course, me, you, everybody, we all had high hopes for this. And how did it turn out? It's alright. Yeah, it's a good record. It's well produced, the interludes do a great job, some songs slap especially hard, and the concept is explored in a pretty compelling way. But in opposition, we have a second half that is considerably weaker than the first one. And also, the fact this doesn't really feel like an upgrade over After Hours. Yeah, I agree. The Weeknd didn't necessarily have to expand further and beyond with his sound so extensively once again. But I feel like if Dawn FM had came out before After Hours, it would have made for a more decent progression in his discography. Of course because of the quality of the songs, but I also say that due to the sound of the other being way more flushed out than it is in here. Yes, it's a fun ride, and I do believe Abel did a decent job in here, but I was expecting it to be more than what it is. Negative highlights, score of 71% superb. It was alright. Considering this thing was produced by Ninth Freaking Wonder, of course the production is amazing, but the rest of the elements of the record vary from meh to alright. It's a record that begins strong, the positive highlights tell that, but it quickly loses momentum, especially when the negative ones come up. I won't say it's a waste of time though, because, again, it was well produced, and also there's some pretty alright tunes in here to make the short runtime of this record still be worth it. Even if it could be way better, to at least give merit to its GTA-ish album cover. 68%. Well, it was worth to give this thing a shot, even though I knew I wasn't going to be a fan of this. I was never a huge fan of Midwest emo stuff, and post-hardcore tends to be a bit hit or miss to me. And Fawn was a mid-term to me. I didn't dislike it, but I'm also not crazy about it. Notice how there are barely any highlights in here, but I get the appeal. The production is solid, the string arrangements are very substantial, and Megan's a very convincing singer that sounds like she means her words. I don't see this record in the same light as many people do now, but it was still a somewhat positive experience, even if I leave it as just above average. 69%. Aurora is an interesting artist. She has a captivating personality, she has an aesthetic, she has lots of things. But a mind-blowing album, that's not one of them. Yet. This new album of hers is a pretty cool time, but it suffers from a really odd pacing. We have these super lush and epic art pop tracks making the core of the records. But then we have these bouncy synth pop tracks that aren't bad, but it has a really bizarre contrast with the records. I feel like it was supposed to actually bring a good dichotomy, but in reality, it's some pretty clumsy transitions, and this happens more than once in here. On the other hand, there are more than enough songs to make up for that. The positive highlights are notable for being some of Aurora's best songs ever, but the album overall is fine. I wouldn't mind listening to it again, but it's not one of my focuses at the moment. Negative highlights, 73%. Alright, new Earthless album. 1 hour, 1 minute, 3 songs. Let's go. It's good. Earthless have been on hot water recently after their previous album Black Heaven being such a change of pace. An album that overall felt much less inventive as their music has been in the past, and made it their most polarizing record so far. Now, we jump back to the present, and what we got is basically the band saying fuck go back after the reception of Black Heaven. Which by the way is not a bad album, just the black sheep of their discography. This is very much in line with what the band usually puts out structure-wise. It's not as psychedelic, and at points, it's noisier, which can be a two-edged sword sometimes, because it works amazingly in the part 1 of the title track, and not so much in the part 2. To prove that, these are the both ends of the highlights. And the third track that comes is also surprisingly catchy and also a good time. I'm not sure if this album is the band returning back to form or if Black Heaven was just a one-time only event. But in whatever case it is, I can affirm you guys, this new record of theirs is surprisingly great. In other words, 79% superb. Piece of Me is a very substantial solo release that blends in well elements of a more old-school sound with modern production. Wray's performances are beautiful. She does an amazing job in complementing the instruments in the background, and it's rare that she lets down. It's not a release that has a unique sound, but the quality here is still very present. And Wray shows that she has even more potential for future releases. Let's see what she'll bring to us next. Here comes the highlights, and the score I give 83%. I think this album begins strong, but loses momentum quickly. It is still somewhat in the vein of some rap songs, of these super short but still compelling tracks. The difference is that it's nowhere near as depressive. I'm not saying it's a happy record, but it's not an album that makes you kinda want to die like a bunch of his previous releases. Another thing this album shares with its predecessor is that I don't care much about either. I think they're fine, nothing too offensive outside of the negative highlights, but I wouldn't go out of my way to listen to it. The positive highlights are pretty good though. I'm not really a person that gets the hype surrounding Earl, so this may have affected my overall experience of the records. Maybe in a few years it will all make sense and this review will be as outdated as the theories that will never come out. 62%. And if you look to your right, ladies and gentlemen, you have the first big disappointment of the year. I was kinda looking forward to this new Del and Kool Keith project, considering Del has been having a considerable rise from the ashes with his recent releases. And I guess this new album was a perfect way to kick me in the balls and say,
No.
This album is based on two extremes. It's either really boring or really annoying. None of the artists involved drop any notable bars or flows, and it's certainly not helped by the beats, that are basically nasal diarrheas that don't even sound like B-sides, they're more like Y-sides in average. Did I really just reuse a joke? And the few ones that stand out do so by being some of the most serious things ever. Check the negative highlights at your own risk. It's even hard to believe that one of the men involved in this project is responsible for Del Tron freaking 3030, an album that pretty much made me believe he could do no wrong. And I learned I was wrong in the most bitter way. I wish Del was rising from the ashes, but at last here we are. And I'm sad. Not even the positive highlights can save this 29% superb record. Alright, we just talked about the worst album of the month. Can we talk about something a little better now? Oh, thank God! Considering its lengthy runtime, I was expecting this project to be pretty bloated. But to my surprise, it was actually a really good listen. Amber shows herself to be a super charismatic vocalist, and the beats in this thing have a notorious staying power. It's a record that uses well the traditional trap-influenced R&B sounds that are so all over the mainstream right now. But she takes it, and makes it sound like something truly authentic, which is something I deeply respect to see. It shows that she truly cares about her art. The only downside here to me is, again, referring to the length. I don't think it's bloated, but to me, it feels more like a deluxe version than a standard one. The record could have ended on Dark Side, and the 4 songs after could be deluxe tracks. I feel like that would make the experience of the record feel more impactating overall, but even without that, I still think this is one amazing record. And hopefully, Amber Mark stays with that much heart in her future releases. Here comes the highlights, both positive and negative. And the score of the record here is 89%. It's not really extraordinary, but I do believe Visions is a solid work from Vinny and company. The production is pretty well polished, except for the final track, I don't know why it's mixed so loudly. And the jingle poppy influences here really makes this stand out in Red Fox's discography. The positive highlights show how dynamic this album can be, and even at its weakest, this album isn't bad at all. It just may sound like a rehash of ideas in some points, but no biggie in this case. To conclude, it's indeed a pretty solid project, and it makes me curious to see what's going to be the next step in the band's discography. The score here is 79%. Wow, it's incredible. Doesn't matter how many genres Boris dives into, I always end up not getting the hype. These guys did stoner, did post-rock, did sludge metal, and every time I listen to them, their music doesn't click at all. And for W, the case applies. But I don't simply think it's mediocre, this is straight up bad. For a post-rock album, a genre that is usually known for being super immersive, this sounds super shallow. The passages feel totally bland, and I leave this record feeling like it didn't add anything to my life. It sucks because I want to like Boris, I want to get the hype, but I guess the band's not for me. Here are the highlights, if you can even call them that, And the score here is 36%. In the end, W was an L.
Auto-generated review number 24014. It's somewhat resembling of what the band has done in the past, just way weaker. Ian Anderson sounds like he doesn't want to be there, and there are some surprisingly good moments and some obvious weak ones. And overall is pretty much just more music to please fans, but not for new listeners.
This review applies to 90% of all modern releases of classic 60s and 70s bands, just replacing Ian Anderson with any other vocalist. Therefore, this new Jethro Tull record is exactly what you would expect. Please continue, Brad Potts.
Thank you. As I was saying, here are the positive highlights, here are the negative highlights, and here is the score of the record, which is 68%.
And here we have the first collage of 2022. Hope Clinton is ready for another batch of albums I like being forced into him, because I certainly am.